I want to release content more frequently this year, so I'm going to start making monthly videos like this, where I reflect on the games I beat over the month, and highlight the things I found most interesting about them. So let's get right into it. The first game I got to the end of this year was Horizon Zero Dawn. It's that game where you fight robot, animal, dinosaur things. It's a ton of fun. Every fight is engaging because each enemy has a different set of strengths and weaknesses that require you to constantly think through, vary, and develop your approach. Some are incredibly aggressive and require you to constantly dodge. Some can soak up a lot of damage unless you're using certain environmental weapons. And some have heavy weapons on their back you can shoot off and turn against them for massive damage. Despite having a leveling and upgrading system, the most meaningful form of progression in this game is what you learn from fighting every enemy, and it makes you identify more with the main character who's learning to survive in this harsh world.
Which is great because it helps you get immersed in a story that's even cooler than the things I just mentioned.
It becomes apparent early on that the world of Horizon is our world in the future, after something's obviously gone very, very wrong. Most of the main story is dedicated to finding out what that something was.
This is mostly communicated through audio and text logs.
But even if that's not terribly innovative, the writing in them is some of the best I've ever seen in video games.
You get the perspectives of several fleshed out characters, and the emotional depth of what they experienced, as their world gave way to the one you have to fight through. The themes of these stories from the past, of hubris, ambition, and what legacy you leave behind for future generations, work so well because everything you experience in the game is a result of these people's actions. Its writers could have made a really good novel with all the same material, but so much is added by actually having to fight through all the sonar chickens. Other media can only show people facing challenges, but video games can actually simulate you going through them, even if it's just by learning to outsmart a computer program. Zero Dawn is at its best when it's alternating between a steady stream of difficult robot fights and tragic backstory behind why those fights became necessary in the first place. Unfortunately, this balance gets thrown off a bit when you're doing too much side content, which focuses primarily on the game's present day. This stuff is all above average, but it's not the best of the decade tier writing that the main story is. Though really, I think it would have been fine if I hadn't gone right into playing the DLC. The Frozen Wilds expansion has much less of that interesting stuff from the past, and playing it after most of the main story made it feel like a really anticlimactic fourth act. If you play Horizon and really love the combat, I'm sure you'd love Frozen Wilds, and I did appreciate it for the new enemies that it introduced. But if you find you enjoy the main story way more than everything else, I would just ignore this entirely. That's all the big picture stuff I have to say about this game. Now I just want to talk about a small thing this game made me think of, which is inventory systems. I think a good inventory system only induces stress to serve a purpose. Most gamers are familiar with the systems in Elder Scrolls and Fallout games. Most items you pick up will have a certain weight, and depending on your stats, there'll be a total amount of weight you can carry before you're unable to fast travel and start walking really slowly. For one, putting this stress on the player gives the feeling of being an adventurer, making important packing decisions while on a journey. But it also makes sure the player's inventory is manageable at any given time. Part of the appeal of these games is that you can pick up almost anything lying around, and if there wasn't some limit on that, every time you opened up your inventory you'd have a panic attack. It forces the player to do some cleaning and learn what's actually valuable. Even with this limitation, my inventory is often a nightmare.
So it's hard for me to imagine what it would be like otherwise, even if deciding what to drop just feels like annoying busy work. You know what game did this even better? Pathologic 2. You have limited squares of inventory, and some items take more squares than others. This is a game where you're constantly on the edge of death, and often have less than enough of necessary resources. So you want everything on you possible, be it for quests, trading, or just basic survival. But you also need to pick up new stuff to increase the resources at your disposal. Every decision about what goes in or out of your inventory feels like it has really high stakes. And most of the game is time sensitive. When you pick up new items and shift things into your inventory, the game doesn't pause. Arranging your inventory properly is a mandatory mechanic. If you don't do it, you might find some valuable resources and have to waste valuable time rearranging things. All these quirks of Pathologic 2's inventory add on to the effect that you're a stressed, overworked person, which is kind of Pathologic 2's whole thing. My other favorite inventory system is the Souls series, which is incredibly hard, but decided to not limit how many things you could have in your inventory. I imagine the designers knew it wasn't necessary or wouldn't add anything to the game. See, you actually don't need to limit how many things someone can carry and still have an incredibly challenging game. Which brings us back to Horizon Zero Dawn, which has inventory limits that are never anything but an occasional annoyance. Like every hour or so you'll run out of space, and then have to go into a town to sell things. This is obnoxious, but it happens so infrequently that it doesn't add anything to the game. There also aren't really enough items to justify this. Most of your inventory will usually just be taken up by ammo crafting materials that don't stack above a certain number. The game also allows you to expand your inventory, but the way to do this is by killing normal animals in the hopes that they'll drop a specific random item they only drop like 1/5 of the time. If you're making me kill foxes, they better be 20 feet tall and robotic. I'm not saying this to shit on Horizon. I just want to mention that it's totally reasonable to not have limits on inventory. The second game I finished last month was Disco Elysium. I'd call this a point-and-click RPG, I think. You play a detective trying to solve a murder mystery, but you're dropped into his shoes after an intense drug binge, which wiped away most all of his memories. So you have to solve your case, while also clawing back together your sense of self. Immediately, your last few remaining brain cells start having conversations with you. These are also your skills, and they'll talk to you more frequently if you put more points into them. For instance, leveling up the encyclopedia skill will result in a little nerdy voice telling you valuable backstory in the game's world. Or if you level up the electrochemistry skill, it'll tell you to do drugs. This might be starting to sound exhaustingly dark, but the game sidesteps this by having your main character behave more like a child than the cliché damaged anti-hero. This allows for hilarious scenarios once you start to interact with people who aren't inside your head, while still getting across the emotional impact of someone being so broken they regress several decades. For being a game that's mostly dialogue trees, it also has some gameplay aspects that really complement this. The most high-pressure part of the game is just skill checks, and while their chances of success are increased as you put more levels into a skill, they're ultimately random. This is definitely not the right choice for every game. Some games should simulate the 100% mastery that comes with being good at something, but not when your character is unstable and having conversations with themselves. It totally clears that this person would mess up even at the thing they're the best at. And I love having to catch my breath before all of these checks, and feeling relieved if they succeed, which is also experienced by the character, who is often way too proud of achieving things that are part of the minimum expectations of someone with his job. The two ways you can boost your stats are also really interesting. Every piece of clothing in the game has both bonuses and demerits, subtractions, and a lot of skill checks allow you to leave the conversation and then come back to try them with different clothing. Makes it feel like you're playing dress up for all these different situations. The way I thought about this is like, this detective used to be really good at all the skills in the game, but has forgotten most of them, and different pieces of clothing refresh or dampen his memory. The second way you can boost stats is by taking drugs. I've seen other games simulate drug use, but often as a mechanic you can totally ignore if you want to. Here it's one of just two ways to help get over the most defined barrier the game places in front of you. So without anything but gameplay demands, the game gets you to compulsively drink or do speed before conversations, so the voices in your head will talk to you, which is a special kind of disturbing. I also love the world that the main character is situated within. It's not our world, but it maintains most of the same technology, social struggles, and economic systems. There's been genocides, revolutions, and multinational takeovers, but the game explores these events by looking at the lives of people that have to live in their fallout decades or centuries in the future. People in the game are considering communism, fascism, neoliberalism. They're digesting the history of people who tried to shape the world around those ideologies. But most of all, they're just trying to survive. Disco Elysium's creators have very clear ideological sympathies.
And Marx and Engels for providing us the political education.
But I'm really glad they didn't make a heavy-handed game about building world communism, because the smaller stories they focus on still explore all the same ideas and are so much more emotionally powerful. And by making a fictional world with fake countries, it avoids simplifying real-life events and avoids some preconceived notions people often bring into conversations about politics. Disco Elysium is a great game with appropriate mechanics and a great world explored through specific personal stories. It is mostly reading though. I have dyslexia, so reading is never really a relaxing activity for me. I don't need video games to be relaxing in order for me to enjoy them, and I obviously got a lot out of this game, but I felt I should just let folks know about that. The last game I finished in January was Hitman 2, and I guess also Hitman 1. I played all of its missions inside Hitman 2 though, because it lets you do that. I admire the design philosophy behind these games. Each mission sees you assassinating a group of targets, somewhere in a large map, full of hidden areas and time-specific events. Each is so big with so many things to do within them that you'll probably only grasp about 20 to 30% of their complexity your first time through. If you just play every mission on the standard difficulty back to back, you'd get a really short and underwhelming experience. The game is built around playing the same level over and over again, finding new secrets and completing challenges. Hitman, rather than give you a lot of similar quests that blend together in your memory after the fact, uses repetition to make the player remember and appreciate its complexity. Trying to complete all the challenges in a level felt like being given a fun guided tour through all the cool things the developers made. When I get tripped up by the same guard or security camera for the 5th time, I feel like I can hear the developers explaining why they put it there. Hitman also made me appreciate the ways that odds are tipped in your favor in other shooters, where you can take down dozens and dozens of enemies. It is very hard to survive large gunfights in Hitman. Aiming guns and executing a single shot is very satisfying, making them viable for taking out a target, but recoil is hampering, making it hard to fight anyone else in succession, putting you at a disadvantage against groups. Additionally, the game doesn't care about giving you a safe place to be in cover. Enemies will converge on you from all directions, making it really easy to get overwhelmed. These are such cool methods to give the player really powerful weapons and then discourage them from using them. Hitman feels like a celebration of game design, and it got me daydreaming about what other sorts of cool games could be made like this. I had moments in Hitman where I was playing a level for like the 3rd or 4th time and heard a piece of dialogue I'd never heard before that gave me new information on a target. And as impressed as I was by that, I couldn't help but wish that it was information about a character I cared about. This isn't a criticism of Hitman. I think its pulpy comedic tone and characters fit it perfectly. I would just love to see other studios adopt the philosophy of having a few dense, replayable environments to go places other than absurdist comedy, as cool as that is. Having a game with so much stuff going on that rewards going in every nook and cranny and gives the player constant new discoveries, that also has stories and worlds as interesting as Horizon Zero Dawn and Disco Elysium, would be amazing. I really hope these Hitman games have a large influence on the industry going forward, and I'm still having a blast playing them. I put finished in quotes at the beginning because I've still barely explored most of these levels, so I guess I'll get back to that. Hope you enjoyed the video. I guess I'll see you again at least in early March. Bye.